Imagine standing at the foot of an ancient pyramid. Above you blazes the sun, and all around, hundreds of eyes are filled with anticipation. In just a moment, you will witness a ritual that would chill the blood even of people today. Here, atop a massive stone staircase, Aztec priests carry out a sacrifice, not a theatrical show, but a real act in which a human life is worth no more than the shadow of a passing cloud. You will hear the beating of drums, smell the scent of blood, and see a heart ripped from a chest, all in the name of ancient gods and for the sake of order in this world. This is not just a story. This is a shocking reality that can make you uneasy even centuries later. But before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. You stand at the foot of a pyramid, so massive, so utterly indifferent to your small existence, that you begin to wonder if you are about to witness history or merely become another anonymous spectator in its long, sticky aftermath. The stones beneath your sandals are warm from the midday sun, though the warmth does nothing to ease your anxiety. They are not smooth, these stones. No, centuries of rain and, let's be honest, rivers of blood have left them pitted and cracked. You notice, with the mild fascination of a sleep-deprived tourist, a brownish stain here, a smudge there, and realize you are gazing upon what some might call the footprints of civilization and what others would simply call unpleasant. To call this a temple would be misleading, as if it were merely a place of worship, like a church or a mosque. No, this is something more ambitious, a monument to engineering, faith, and the elaborate coordination required for mass murder. The pyramid rises in rigid, geometric layers, terraces, platforms, and staircases all leading inexorably upward, as if the architects had a grudge against gravity. You try counting the steps, but lose track around 40, give or take a few, your mind wandering to how many unfortunate souls stumbled on these very same stones, only to be prodded upward by a jaguar cloaked priest. Your guide, whose smile never quite reaches his eyes, drones on about sacred geometry and the importance of the pyramid in connecting the earth and sky. You suppress a yawn. There are exactly no jokes in his monologue, but he does explain that each stair is symbolic, that the pyramid itself is a recreation of the mythic mountain where the gods gathered to create the world. You are told, with a gravity that borders on self-parody, that without these sacrifices, these gifts of blood, the sun would fail to rise. A cosmic transaction, a heart for another dawn. You wonder privately if this was merely a clever way to keep the masses busy, or if they genuinely feared the cosmic consequences of thriftiness. It is noon. The plaza is a sea of people, traders hawking trinkets, mothers shoshing their children, young men whose nervousness betrays their bravado. Everyone is waiting for the same thing, whether in anticipation or resignation. You spot a group of priests at the base of the pyramid, faces painted crimson, and bodies adorned in the pelts of large cats. They move with the confidence of men who know their place in the world is secure, at least until a neighboring city state conquers them and decides their own gods are superior. Someone behind you whispers that today is a special feast, an event that only happens once every few years. You nod, as if you are already intimately familiar with the Aztec calendar and its infinite cycle of festivals, fasts, and bloodletting. If you have done your homework, you would know this. The number of steps leading up the pyramid is not arbitrary. Some say it matches the number of days in the year. Others claim it is a code, an esoteric message to the gods that only the high priests can decipher. If you are bored already, you are not alone. History has a way of repeating itself, usually with more ceremony and less subtlety each time. A hush falls over the crowd. You are struck by how well rehearsed it all is. Thousands of people moving as one, as if prompted by a director just out of sight. The priests begin their ascent. At this distance, they appear almost like ants, each carrying some crucial, invisible burden. You squint, half expecting a stray sandal to come tumbling down the stairs, but no such luck. As the procession climbs, you find yourself musing. How often does someone have to clean these stones? Is there a special position in the priestly hierarchy for chief of bleach and buckets? And if not, why not? The smell of copal incense fills the air, masking, you hope, less savory odors. With each step, the figures above grow smaller, and yet the weight of their ritual only grows. This is not entertainment, though you would be forgiven for thinking otherwise. It is, in its way, the very lifeblood of the city, both literally and metaphorically. You recall, with a mixture of amusement and discomfort, the guide's explanation. The gods do not ask for much, merely a constant, reliable supply of human hearts. This, apparently, is what passes for cosmic insurance. You wonder if, somewhere in the bureaucracy of the temple, there is a record keeper tallying the quotas, checking off boxes to ensure that the sun does not run out of fuel. And if there is, does he ever get a day off? As you watch, the priests reach the summit and disappear from view. The crowd waits, patient, resigned, or secretly thrilled. You shift your weight from foot to foot, acutely aware that what you are about to witness is both a sacred act and, frankly, a logistical nightmare. You wonder if anyone has ever suggested a more efficient way to appease the gods, perhaps a simple memo or a heartfelt poem. But no, this is the way it has always been, and so it shall continue until someone invents a religion with fewer cleanup requirements. The sun burns overhead, indifferent to your discomfort. You realize, with a wry sense of inevitability, that you are now part of this ritual, an observer, a minor character in a play that has been performed countless times before you, and will, no doubt, be performed countless times after you have gone. You sigh, resigned, and settle in for the long wait. After all, history does not hurry for anyone, Not even for you. You have heard, perhaps, that in ancient times, fate was a slippery thing. One day you were basking in the sun, gnawing on a roasted maize cake, and the next you were being gently invited to join the gods atop a pyramid. That's how it happens today. At first, it looks like a game, a festive selection process, but you soon recognize the grim efficiency that can only come from centuries of practice. Victims, you learn, do not just wander up and volunteer. There is an order to things, a hierarchy of sacrifice. First come the prisoners, fresh from the battlefield, still wearing their battered armor and what is left of their dignity. Next, the criminals, petty thieves and the unlucky souls who broke some law on the wrong day. And then, in a twist that feels like a punchline, written by a particularly morbid comedian, the volunteers, allegedly, being chosen as a sacrifice is the highest honor a person can receive. You notice that volunteers are, for some reason, in suspiciously short supply. Perhaps the gods are not as persuasive as advertised. Today, as you squint through the haze of incense, you see the chosen ones lined up. There are not many, just enough to satisfy tradition and maybe the local priest's desire to keep their jobs. Each victim receives a few words of comfort, a ritual bath, and the kind of clothing that looks ceremonial right up until the point it is stained with something less festive. The crowd, always eager for spectacle, watches with what you can only describe as professional curiosity. You wonder, with a shiver, whether this is how sports fandom began. Thousands of people watching strangers go through something terrible, then analyzing it afterward as if it were a chess match. Now comes the recitation of the rules. You hear the head priest. His voice is steady, practiced. Explain the process. The hour has been calculated according to the sacred calendar. The names of the gods are invoked. Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, leads the list, followed by an entire pantheon you suspect would fill a phone book. Each god gets their due. The crowd murmurs, reciting prayers they have probably known since childhood. You can almost sense their relief that today, at least, it is not their turn. The scale of the sacrifice is impressive. On special feast days, the numbers can climb dozens, even hundreds, sometimes thousands. This is not just rumor. Chroniclers from distant lands have counted the bodies, written down the numbers, and argued about them for generations. You are told the largest festivals lasted for days, with lines of victims snaking up the pyramid like some macabre parade. The priests work in shifts, you imagine, like bureaucrats at an overworked passport office. You briefly wonder if there is a union for sacrificial priests. If so, what are the benefits? You begin to understand the psychological machinery behind the ritual. The priests do not simply kill, they persuade, manipulate, cajole. The promise is not of mere death, but of promotion, a guaranteed afterlife in the company of the gods, a chance to ride the sun's chariot, to become a star. For the condemned, it is perhaps a comforting story. For everyone else, It is a powerful deterrent wrapped in piety and pageantry. No one wants to be the next in line, but everyone knows that sometimes fate, or a priest with a long memory, can choose at random. The instruments are brought out. You watch as a junior priest polishes an obsidian knife, the blade glinting in the sun. Obsidian, you recall, is volcanic glass, sharp enough to split hair, and as the guide mentions with a touch of pride, sharper than the best steel of the time. There are other tools too: bowls for catching blood, ceremonial stones for binding arms and legs, ropes woven with intricate knots that almost look decorative. Almost. You wonder if some ancient artisan ever dreamed his handiwork would serve in such a setting, or if this was simply the best use for his skills. Now the high priest inspects the offerings, human and otherwise. Each step is ritualized, from the way the captive's hands are tied to the words whispered in their ears. There is an odd dignity to it, you think. Everyone knows their role. Everyone has rehearsed this scene countless times. You can almost hear the director's voice in the background, urging the cast to remember their marks. The crowd is restless. A vendor shouts, hawking tamales and drinks to the onlookers. You are struck by the normalcy of it all. Death as public entertainment, sandwiched between snacks and gossip. You try to imagine what would happen if someone suggested a less violent form of devotion, perhaps a poetry reading or a community garden. The priests, you suspect, would not approve. A historian in the crowd, there is always at least one, leans over to explain that these kinds of rituals are not unique to the Aztecs. The Maya had their own bloody ceremonies. Even the ancient Egyptians, so fond of their pyramids, had a taste for human sacrifice, though on a much smaller scale. The difference, it seems, is that the Aztecs made it an art form. They kept records, tallied numbers, refined the choreography. Some say the largest single day sacrifice involved the deaths of several thousand victims, their bodies tumbling down the steps in a cascade that no one present could ever forget. You grimace, imagining the mess. It is almost time. The priests signal, the drums begin, the crowd falls silent. You feel a chill despite the heat. The first victim is led up the stairs, accompanied by chanting. You wonder what he is thinking. If he believes in the promises, if he regrets his choices, or if he is simply too frightened to think at all. The priests look resolute, almost bored. For them, this is just another day at the office. You realize how much of the city's identity is bound up in this ritual. This is not just a sacrifice, it is a performance, an act of collective will, a demonstration that the world is ordered and the gods are watching. It is, in a sense, a way to stave off chaos, to reassure the people that someone, somewhere, knows what they are doing. Whether or not this is true is a question best left for philosophers. As you watch the procession begin, you reflect on the logistics. Who cleans the pyramid afterward? How long does it take to scrub centuries of blood from stone? Is there a secret recipe for removing stains handed down from priest to priest. You suspect there is, and that it is as closely guarded as any religious secret. You cannot help but smile, imagining a priest in full regalia, scrubbing away with a rag and muttering curses under his breath. And yet, as you stand in the shadow of this colossal monument, you cannot help but feel a strange awe. Here's a civilization that built cities, mapped the stars, invented chocolate, and decided that the best way to keep the sun rising was with regular, scheduled violence. You wonder what future tourists will think when they stand where you stand, staring up at the weathered stones, piecing together the stories from the fragments left behind. In the end, you suppose, every civilization finds its own way of making sense of the world. Some build monuments, some invent stories, and some, like the Aztecs, do both, with a little extra blood for good measure. You yawn as the drums thunder overhead and think, there is nothing quite so soporific as the predictability of human nature dressed up as destiny. You would be forgiven for thinking that climbing the pyramid is the hardest part of this entire enterprise. You quickly discover that the ritual itself, the heart of the spectacle, if you will, is every bit as methodical as it is theatrical. The victims, robed in their ceremonial garb, ascend one by one, guided by priests whose steady hands betray years of practice. The steps are narrow, worn by centuries of feet, and presumably not a few unfortunate tumbles. You find yourself imagining the world's worst workplace safety manual. Step with care, for blood is slippery, and gods are not responsible for accidents. As you follow the procession upward, the city falls away beneath you, replaced by the sky's brilliant blue and the collective anticipation of the crowd. The drums grow louder, relentless. Someone behind you coughs nervously. Someone ahead of you tries to hide their trembling. If you were inclined toward poetic metaphors, you might say this is a stairway between worlds, a path from the everyday to the eternal. In truth, it is just a long, hot climb, punctuated by the smell of incense and the knowledge that you are walking into history, whether you want to or not. The summit is not what you expected. It is smaller, almost cramped, a stage built for efficiency, not for comfort. There are stains here, impossible to mistake, and a flat altar of polished stone at the very center. Four priests stand ready at each corner, their faces painted in patterns that are meant to intimidate, but mostly make them look like participants in a particularly morose children's play. The high priest stands at the head of the altar, his headdress a small mountain of feathers, jade and gold. His name, so long and tangled you would never attempt to pronounce it, translates roughly as "He who opens the door of the dawn." The irony is not lost on you. Doors, after all, can swing both ways. You look out over the city and realize the crowd has grown silent. The only sounds are the steady beat of drums and the higher, keening notes of bone flutes. You catch a glimpse of the death whistle performers, actors whose job is to create the shrieks of the underworld. The effect is not exactly comforting. You feel a shiver, as if the air itself is vibrating with tension. The victim is brought forward. He is laid upon the altar, arms and legs pinned by the assistant priests, his chest exposed to the sky. There is ceremony even in this moment, the recitation of prayers, the sprinkling of water, the passing of obsidian blades over the flames to cleanse them. You notice the attention to detail. Every gesture matters. Every word is precise. This is not a rushed execution, but a choreography designed to please both the gods above and the audience below. The high priest raises the knife. Obsidian glints, so sharp it catches the light, so thin it could almost disappear. For a moment, everything is still. The victim's eyes close, whether in fear, faith, or simple exhaustion, you cannot say. The knife descends. There is a moment of shocking efficiency, a skill honed by practice and necessity. The priest's hand is steady. The cut is quick. Blood wells up, splashing across the altar and the hands of those who hold the victim steady. You do not look away, though you wish you could. There is a clinical quality to the act, a detachment that is somehow more disturbing than outright cruelty. The heart is lifted high, beating its last in the priest's hand, shown first to the sky, an offering to the sun, and then placed in a bowl filled with copal smoke and flower petals. The crowd erupts below, the sound rolling up the pyramid like thunder. For a brief moment, you understand the power of ritual, the way it binds people together, making sense out of fear, hope, and mystery. Or perhaps it is simply the satisfaction of seeing a job done well, no matter how grim. The assistants release the body, which is then dragged to the side. In some festivals, the bodies are sent tumbling down the steps, an act that is both efficient and, in a way, practical. Gravity, it seems, is the priesthood's silent partner. You wonder, as you always do, who invented this particular bit of theater. Did someone, centuries ago, stand atop a freshly built pyramid and think, we need more spectacle, we need something that the people will never forget? You notice now the cleaning crew, young novices with buckets and brooms, trained to erase the evidence before the next victim is brought up. There is little time for reflection. The ritual must continue. The gods must be fed. The schedule must be kept. In another life, you suspect, these men would be accountants, or perhaps stagehands in a grand theater. Here, they are custodians of the sacred and the unsavory alike. A moment of comparative history drifts into your mind. The guide from earlier was right. The Aztecs were not alone in this. The Maya practiced similar sacrifices, as did the ancient Carthaginians, and, allegedly, even the Romans in the earliest days. Yet none matched the Aztecs for organization. Records were kept, tallies of hearts, lists of names, prayers meticulously copied. You imagine dusty scrolls somewhere in a forgotten chamber, tracking the great cosmic ledger. On this day, at this hour, the sun was paid in full. You are not sure if you are impressed or simply exhausted by the implications. And what of medicine? The priests, you learn, are not without a dark expertise. Some possess knowledge of anatomy that rivals any modern physician. There are whispered stories of victims who survive, patched up and paraded as miracles, or, more commonly, as warnings. There are herbal salves and smoke, treatments for pain, and ways to stave off infection, if only for a few moments longer. The line between healer and executioner is as thin as an obsidian blade. As the day wears on, the sky grows red. The steps of the pyramid run slick. The sun, which has watched the proceedings without comment, begins its descent toward the horizon. You are struck by the sense that all of this is a kind of dance, each player hitting their mark, each moment scripted and inevitable. There is no improvisation here. The gods are creatures of habit, and so, you suppose, are their priests. At last, the drums fade. The crowd begins to disperse, murmuring prayers or gossiping about the day's events. You are left with the impression that for all its horror, the ritual has a certain dreary reliability. The world will keep turning, the sun will rise again, and the priests will tally their numbers with the satisfaction of men who have done what was required. You linger at the top of the pyramid, breathing in the acrid scent of smoke and stone, and reflect on the nature of spectacle. In another world, in another age, perhaps there would be different rituals, ones that do not stain the stones red. But for now, this is the world you inhabit, and you are merely a witness, an observer who will soon fade into memory, leaving only footprints and questions behind. It occurs to you, not for the first time, that history is simply a list of things people did to stave off uncertainty. Some built empires, some built pyramids, and some built stories to explain why it all mattered. You sigh, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down, and begin your slow descent, careful not to slip. When the last heart has been lifted and the final body has been dragged aside, you expect silence. Instead, there is a bustle, an oddly domestic aftermath to the public violence atop the pyramid. The priests are not sentimental. As soon as the ritual is done, the practical business of cleaning begins. The altar is wiped, not with reverence, but with brisk efficiency. Buckets of water and handfuls of fragrant herbs are deployed. Copal incense is lit and waved in thick clouds over every surface, less to honor the gods than to mask the unmistakable, coppery tang that stains the stones. You can almost hear the unspoken complaints. Another stain, another day, another rookie who failed to dodge the spray. Somewhere in the corner, an apprentice scrubs at a persistent mark with the determined air of someone who is already planning a different career. You notice as you descend the stairs how quickly the crowd below shifts from solemnity to celebration. If you had just arrived, you might think there was nothing unusual about this day at all. Traders unpack their wares, bundles of maize, carved figurines, cups of steaming chocolate laced with chili and honey. Children dart between legs, chasing each other with shrieks of laughter. A line forms near a row of clay ovens where women slap tortillas flat, humming to themselves, as if the air were not still thick with smoke and the echo of drums. Perhaps you are simply witnessing another form of ritual, one designed to help everyone forget what came before. The feast is, in its way, as important as the sacrifice. It is an opportunity for the city to gather, to reaffirm its shared identity. There are songs, some ancient, some invented on the spot, dancers with painted faces and rattles tied to their ankles leap and spin in a circle, performing stories of the gods and the world's beginnings. A group of elders sits in the shade retelling old myths. How the gods first created men from maize, how they demanded payment in blood so the sun would rise, how the world once nearly ended when the people grew stingy and the gods grew hungry. You listen, and you cannot help but notice how every story ends with a warning. Remember your place, keep the rituals, or risk chaos. You overhear a pair of women discussing the fate of the victims. One insists that the hearts go to the gods, carried away in clouds of smoke and song. The other, more practical, points out that the rest of the body must go somewhere. She says with a shrug that noble families sometimes receive the choicest cuts, a strange honor reserved for the wealthiest and most devout. The reality, you learn, is complicated. Cannibalism, while a popular rumor among outsiders, is not the norm. The priests maintain that it happens rarely, usually during special festivals. More often, the bodies are buried, burned, or offered to animals, an attempt perhaps to return something to the world that has just given so much. As the day turns to evening, the feast grows livelier. Jugs of pulque, fermented agave sap, are passed around, loosening tongues and brightening faces. Someone stands on a crate and begins to recite a poem to the sun, every line carefully constructed, every rhyme an appeal for mercy and good weather. Others drift away in small groups, making offerings at shrines or simply sitting quietly, lost in their own thoughts. The city, so recently united by ritual, splinters into 100 private celebrations. You find yourself drawn to the old men in the shade. Their stories, though familiar, have a new urgency today. One, whose face is a roadmap of wrinkles, tells how the world once paused on the edge of destruction. He insists, in a tone that brooks no argument, that it was only the sacrifices, the steady drip of blood and bone, that convinced the gods to keep the sun alive. You watch as younger listeners nod, some in agreement, some merely out of habit. The lesson is clear. Without ritual, there is only chaos. You wonder how many truly believe it, and how many simply find comfort in repetition. There is a kind of genius in the way myth is woven into daily life. You notice how the priests, now mingling among the people, repeat certain phrases. The gods are satisfied, they say. We are safe for another season. The words are both a reassurance and a warning. You suspect this is no accident. Myth and ritual serve as tools, not just for survival, but for control. It is easier to accept hardship when you believe it is part of a cosmic plan, especially one that you can influence with enough faith, and a sufficient number of willing or unwilling volunteers. Yet, even in the midst of celebration, reminders of the day's violence linger. The pyramid looms over the city, its steps still damp, its summit shrouded in smoke. Some avoid looking at it, focusing instead on the food, the music, the camaraderie. Others stare openly, as if searching for answers in the patterns of dried blood and shadow. A few, more philosophical, joke about the efficiency of the whole affair. At least the gods are predictable. At least we know what they want. You suspect that under the jokes lies real fear, a sense that, for all the feasting and laughter, nothing is ever truly certain. You remember the guide's words from earlier. Civilization is just a long argument with chaos. Here, the argument is one with regular sacrifice, with myth, with carefully managed spectacle. It is, you suppose, a practical arrangement. Everyone has their part to play, even if some parts are less appealing than others. As darkness falls, the city changes again. Fires are lit, shadows stretch across the plaza. The pyramid is now just a silhouette against the sky, its details lost in the growing night. The music fades, replaced by low voices and the chirr of insects. Somewhere, a priest chants a final prayer, asking the gods for peace until morning. The crowd thins. Those who remain linger in small knots, reluctant to leave the safety of numbers. You walk through the streets, past houses of mud and stone, past shrines where families leave offerings, flowers, feathers, scraps of food. You see how the city breathes in the aftermath, some anxious, some relieved, all bound together by what they have witnessed. There is comfort in belonging, even when belonging means sharing in ritual bloodshed. Before sleep, you think again about myth. It is so easy, you realize, to believe in stories, especially when those stories are all you have ever known. The pyramid, the priests, the feasts, these are the anchors that keep the world from drifting. Without them, what would remain? Just the cold stars, the indifferent gods, and the long, empty night. You yawn, stretching in the darkness. Outside, someone laughs, someone else mutters a prayer. The city settles. Above you, the pyramid stands, silent and watchful, a monument to all that has been given and all that is yet to be demanded. You close your eyes, knowing that when the sun rises, it will do so on a city convinced that their sacrifices matter, that order has been restored, at least for now. It is a kind of peace, you suppose, and in the distance, a drumbeat lingers, faint but insistent, promising that the rituals and the myths will begin again tomorrow. Centuries pass, as centuries are wont to do. You stand once again at the foot of the pyramid, though now the scene is quieter, softer, strangely sanitized. The stones are still here, ancient, pitted, their jagged lines dulled by rain, wind, and the careless feet of tourists. You notice the tour groups, their matching hats and water bottles, their voices raised in bored complaint about the heat, the dust, and the lack of free Wi Fi. There are cameras everywhere. The most popular ritual now is the selfie, often with a carefully practiced look of faux reverence or mock fear. You read the plaques posted along the path, bold, clean lettering in several languages, offering a bland summary of what once transpired atop the now quiet stones. Here, the priests of the sun performed their most sacred rites. These stairs once bore witness to the devotion of an entire people. There are no plaques for the blood or the fear or the echoing drums. The past, it seems, is best remembered in broad strokes, the sharper details blurred by polite euphemism. Somewhere nearby, an archaeologist bends over a shallow pit, trowel in hand. She dusts away the soil with infinite patience, pausing every so often to peer at a fragment of bone or a piece of pottery. The guides refer to her as the scientist, as if that word alone can ward off all questions. You watch as she explains, for what must be the 100th time, that most of what is known about the rituals is a matter of educated guesswork, half remembered chronicles, and the persistent tendency of conquerors to exaggerate their enemies' worst qualities. You notice the tourists who seem only half interested. Some ask if the sacrifices are really true. Others want to know if the priests ate the hearts or if there are any ghosts. A few simply want to find the nearest cafe. The archaeologist answers as best she can, pointing out the layers of history. Spanish chronicles filled with horror and judgment, Aztec codices bright with color and ambiguity, the silence of the stones themselves. The real story, she says, is a puzzle, incomplete and perhaps unsolvable. It occurs to you that every civilization is both proud and forgetful. You remember the elders' tales from long ago, stories told and retold to keep the darkness at bay. Now, those tales are museum exhibits, children's books, motifs for video games and t shirts. You see young people posing with plastic jaguar masks, clutching replica obsidian knives. Their parents laugh and clap as if summoning the faintest echo of the original ritual, a performance stripped of danger, smoothed into something consumable. You wander through the ruins, past walls etched with fading glyphs, past stone's serpent heads, chipped and battered by time. You listen as a guide describes the genius of Aztec engineers, their calendars more precise than those of Europe, their understanding of astronomy so advanced that even today scientists scratch their heads. Yet the guide cannot resist ending the tour with a wink. And remember, folks, this is where the human sacrifices happened. Please watch your step on the way down. You pause by a toppled altar, fingers tracing the outline of an ancient stain. It is almost invisible now, little more than a memory in the stone. You think about the people who once stood here, their hopes and fears as real as your own. Did they truly believe that the world depended on these rituals? Did they ever wonder if the gods were listening? Or if, perhaps, they were just putting on a show for each other? You suspect the answer is yes, and yes again. Faith and doubt are, after all, as inseparable as shadow and sun. You sit on the warm stone, letting the weight of years settle around you. In the distance, a group of children chase each other, their laughter rising like bird song. Somewhere, a vendor sells cold drinks and authentic snacks, their recipes as old as conquest, their packaging bright with cartoonish depictions of feathered priests. The sacred has become the ordinary, the terrifying reduced to trivia. You find yourself oddly comforted by this, and at the same time, faintly unsettled. As you watch the crowds, you reflect on what has changed and what has not. The pyramid no longer drinks blood, but it still gathers people. The rituals have shifted form. Tourists climb for the view, not for the gods. Prayers are replaced by photographs, offerings by souvenir coins. Yet beneath the surface, the same forces are at work. People still seek order in chaos, meaning in mystery, belonging in shared stories. It is easier now, perhaps, to forget the price that was once paid for these comforts. You remember the guide's closing words. History is a story we tell ourselves about why things are the way they are. You think about the stories we choose to remember and those we quietly let fade. There is an irony, you realize, in the way civilizations outlive their rituals, but not their need for ritual. Today, the ceremonies are safer, the stakes lower, the gods, if they exist at all, silent and remote. Yet the longing for connection, for certainty, persists. As dusk settles over the ruins, you rise and walk toward the exit. The pyramid is a silhouette now, black against the deepening sky. The last rays of sunlight catch on its highest stones, and for a moment, you almost believe you can hear the faint echo of drums, the distant murmur of a crowd, the sharp cry of a death whistle. The air is thick with ghosts, not the spirits of the sacrificed, but the lingering weight of all that has come before. You turn for one last look. There are tourists snapping photos, guides telling stories, a stray dog nosing through the grass. In another age, the scene would have been unthinkable, life going on, ordinary and undisturbed, in a place once steeped in fear and wonder. Now, the pyramid is merely a landmark, a backdrop for daydreams and bored schoolchildren. It is tempting to mourn the loss of mystery, but you suspect this is how it has always been. Every age invents its own version of the sacred, its own way to keep the darkness at bay. You walk away, feet stirring the dust, heart heavy and light at once. History is not just what is written in books or carved in stone. It is the sum of all the stories, all the silences, all the rituals, old and new, that bind people together. You are, for this moment, both a participant and a spectator, caught in the endless cycle of remembering and forgetting. The pyramid fades into shadow behind you, and still the world turns, stubborn and miraculous, demanding its sacrifices, though now they come in different forms. You sigh, a little amused, a little weary, and step back into the present. The past is never quite done with you, but for now, at least, it is time to sleep.